Evolution. Theories of evolution. 1. Darwinian theory, Charles Darwin. Based on natural selection, organisms struggle for existence in order to survive. Organisms are not at all the same. Variation. Published on the Origin of Species. Charles Robert Darwin. The father of evolution. Darwin's Voyage. From 1831 to 1836, Charles Darwin toured the world in HMS Beagle. The Galapagos Island. The smallest, lowest islands were hot, dry, and nearly barren Hood Island sparse vegetation. The higher islands had greater rainfall and a different assortment of plants and animals. Isabella Island had rich vegetation. Animals found in the Galapagos. Land tortoises. Darwin finches. Blue-footed booby. Marine iguanas. Darwin found that each island in the Galapagos had a different environment, and tortoises looked different depending on which island environment they inhabited. Variation in bill shape among Galapagos finches. Imagine these are beaks. Some are great for big seeds, while others are best for little ones, without the best beak for the available food source. Some finches will not survive to pass their unfavorable traits on to offspring. Darwin's theory of evolution. 1. Overproduction. Most species produce far more offspring than can survive. Those that die are considered weak. These weak organisms do not live long enough to reproduce. Therefore, weak traits are weeded out of the species. 2. Competition. Since living space and food are limited resources, offspring must compete for resources. Those who are good at competition survive long enough to reproduce. Food, shelter, mates, etc. 3. Variations and adaptations. The characteristics of the individuals in any species are not exactly alike. Those individuals that have favorable variations, adaptations, will have a greater chance of living long enough to reproduce. Variation exists within the group of offspring due to sexual reproduction, meiosis and fertilization. Genetic changes to phenotype can be passed on to future generations. Adaptation, an inherited trait that increases an organism's chance of surviving and reproducing in its environment. Structural. Color, shape, and other physical characteristics. Involves parts of the body. Wings for flying, fins for swimming. Behavioral. The way an organism behaves or acts. Functional. Internal body systems that affect biochemistry. Physiological. Involves metabolism of the organism, poison venom. 4. Natural selection. Organisms with variations that make them better adapted to their environment survive and reproduce, passing on these favorable traits to their offspring. Selection. The environment determines which one competed the best and has a chance to survive and pass on its successful genes, alleles. Eventually all tortoises have longer necks. Artificial selection. The breeding of organisms for desired characteristics is called selective breeding. Humans select those variations they find useful. Mutant alleles spread through a population by sexual reproduction. If an allele exerts a harmful effect, it will reduce the ability of the individual to reproduce and the allele will probably be removed from the population. In contrast, mutants with favorable effects are preferentially passed on. The peppered moth is an example of natural selection in action. During the Industrial Revolution, the trees on which the moth rested became soot-covered. Speciation. Over many generations, favorable adaptations gradually accumulate in the species and bad traits disappear. Eventually, the accumulated changes become so big that the result is a new species. 2. Lamarck's theory, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Based on theory of use and disuse, organs not in use will disappear while organs in use will develop. Tendency toward perfection, giraffe necks. 2 major principles. 1. Use and disuse. The more an animal uses a body part, the more developed it becomes, and vice versa. 2. Inheritance of acquired characteristics. Characteristics an organism develops or acquires in its lifetime can be passed on to its offspring.